So gout is a very, very common, highly inflammatory and very painful condition in which we get a buildup of something called uric acid in our bloodstream, and these uric acid crystals can end up depositing in certain tissue types like joints, and because of gravity they tend to really become a problem in places like our big toe, and this can cause a lot of pain and a lot of inflammation very suddenly. So what's gout got to do with metabolic health? Well, first off, we need to understand what purines are, because often the recommendation when you get a gout flare is to deliberately avoid foods that contain a lot of purines. Now, purines are adenine and guanine, and if we think about our DNA, we have this double helix structure, and within that structure we have certain nucleotides, or at least the nitrogen groups within our nucleotides, which are adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine, and if we're talking about mRNA, we also have uracil. Now, as I said, purines are adenine and guanine, and when we are metabolizing these purines, it's considered that we end up producing a whole lot of this uric acid as a byproduct. And then, of course, the avoidance of foods that contain a lot of purines will then therefore help to prevent the buildup of this uric acid in our bloodstream. So, of course, the theory makes sense. If you eliminate foods from your diet that contain a lot of adenine and guanine, so of course animal foods, it makes sense that then you won't be creating as much of the byproduct, which is uric acid, and you won't form these uric acid crystals because you won't be having so much just floating around in your bloodstream. But why is it then that people with normal levels of uric acid in their bloodstream also experience gout? And then there is a huge number of people that consume a very, very meat-heavy diet, like, for example, a carnivore diet, and all they eat are high purine foods. Why is it that they don't end up with something like gout? It's also interesting to note here as well that when you go into ketosis, especially at the beginning, you're making a whole lot of ketones that your body can't use. A lot of these ketones end up getting excreted out in the urine because essentially at the start of a keto diet, when you're metabolically adapting, your body can't really utilize those ketones. They end up getting excreted out, and this is why you lose a lot of weight at the very, very beginning. Now, what's also interesting to note about this is that ketones and uric acid compete for excretion in the kidney. So usually you'd expect that, for example, if somebody's starting a keto diet and they're suddenly making a whole lot of ketones, their uric acid levels are going to increase because they're competing there. Why is it that somebody on a ketogenic diet doesn't necessarily get gout, despite the fact that their uric acid levels have increased? It's all to do with inflammation. So why is this relevant here? Well, when we're inflamed, one of the regions of the body that really, really seems to struggle is the kidneys. We can see that in things like, for example, your urea, creatinine ratio. Often metabolites that usually should get filtered through the kidney end up building up in the bloodstream, and this is a really good way of seeing how your kidney health is and whether or not they are filtering products and excreting things that need to be excreted. And so what's really interesting is that people that end up with gout often have issues, whether or not it is either just an inflammatory process going on in the kidneys where they can't filter things properly, or perhaps they might even have a kidney stone that is blocking the ability for those kidneys to be able to excrete things. And so what's very, very interesting to understand is that when somebody goes on a non-inflammatory diet, something that's going to lower in the inflammatory byproducts in the body, like a keto diet, a carnivore diet, or at least a diet that's going to decrease the consumption of pro-inflammatory foods like grains and seed oils, their uric acid levels may actually stay high for at least a time, but they don't end up with gout. They don't end up with this inflammatory state in which their body is not able to excrete byproducts of metabolism. So I think this is a really interesting nuance, and I think it's important to understand this because just by eliminating foods that have, high purine loads, like liver, you could be, without using a dumb pun, shooting yourself in the foot.